3 decades ago, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers captured my imagination. Like many of my fellow 90s kids, I watched after school, joined the official fan club, and of course, collected the toys. Eventually, I put those toys away, but the flame of my Power Rangers fandom never died. Now, in this milestone 30th anniversary year, I am re-examining the show, its legacy, and the tale of its most legendary ranger across media. It's time to get back to action. Welcome to Summoning the ZORDS, a Power Rangers fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss the 3-part arc, There's No Business Like Snow Business, as well as the 4-episode Arrowhead arc, is one of the hosts of the Dollar Bin Bandits podcast and a returning guest, Joe Marcello. Welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's my pleasure to be here.
Last time you were here, very early on in this podcast, although I ended up holding the episode a bit after I put everything on pause following the tragic passing of Jason David Frank. But the last time you were here, we talked about the Boom Studios comics, and we had a wonderful chat, and the comics are fantastic. But I was like, I got to have you back to actually talk about the show because that's where all of this starts. And so I'm very happy to have you back here. And we're now in the middle part of our ZEO trilogy, 3 podcast episodes looking at key episodes and arcs from ZEO. And I know we are similarly aligned in that we both stopped watching the franchise back in the day during ZEO. I know a little bit now because we were just talking off mic, but you had a revelation as you were watching these episodes, yes?
Yeah. So I was watching these and I started to really look at them. And I'm looking at them again as older, a little bit more wiser, more experienced, I guess. And I realized that there was a quality drop off with the ZEO season. And I don't know if that's a lot to say as it pertains to the Power Rangers, I think, because there was a certain amount of quality or lack thereof just originally because, you know, of the way the show was created. And it seemed like there was a bit of a drop off with ZEO. Now, I don't know if that just because there was a lot of change going on behind the scenes between characters and story-wise, and you know, they're trying to, you know, Saban Entertainment is trying to keep the train moving along, but there was a different feel beyond just the whole characterization, and you know, it's no longer Mighty Morphin, it's ZEO, etc. So as you know, as we mentioned earlier, I'm looking at this and I'm like, there's stuff I don't really remember. Not that I expect to remember everything, but I'm like, I think this was about where I stopped watching back in the day. And I remember Turbo, which was after this, as I recall. And that was it. Like that was that was the line drawn in the sand, and I was done because I remember watching Turbo like on VHS or something, never in the theaters, but and that was it. So to dive back into this was interesting, and you know, kind of analyzing it more with a production eye versus just a fan eye. So it was a little interesting. I don't know what your take is. I know we may actually have differing opinions on this one.
I think we might, but I completely understand why. And I just want to say thank you for joining me generally, but especially for doing these episodes, because even for me in this podcast, these episodes we're looking at are a little bit of an outlier, as I've been saying many times and has been clear from what people know we've been talking about. Essentially, what I've been rewatching have been the so-called the bigger episodes, right? The ones that have more of an impact on the overall arc of the shows and the mythology. We've been looking at episodes where Rangers have left and when they've gotten new powers and new Zords and new villains. That's primarily what we've been revisiting and discussing. Right. And as I say in almost every episode, I think it's given me a little bit of a skewed perspective because I'm watching the biggest episodes. I'm like, this show's amazing. There's always all this amazing stuff happening. And I've been skipping a lot of the more run-of-the-mill episodes. What we looked at here, I would say, kind of falls somewhere in between because we do have a three-parter. There's no business like snow business, and then again, I'm just calling it the Arrowhead arc. That it doesn't even have an overall title or anything like that. It's not Arrowhead Part One or anything like that. They're four
Right.
largely standalone episodes. The last two, do have a to be continued, and or the third, the second to last has a to be continued. But Tommy's quest, his vision quest, the meeting of his long lost brother, all of that carries throughout those four episodes. So they really form a nice little arc. And when you look at these 7 episodes together, very a very personal Tommy-centric run of episodes. So it's a step above, I would say, than just the typical standalone run-of-the-mill episode, but not quite the height of something like a Zeo beginning or Master Vile and the Metallic Armor, or things like that
Right.
that we've been talking about.
Right. You got more into the characters, which was that in and of itself is a breath of fresh air as it pertains to Power Rangers, because you never really, I mean, you really didn't have much depth to the characters beyond, let's say, oh, Tommy and Kimberly like each other, stuff like that. So now you're getting into, okay, there's these characters they have family, and there's more to them. There's one thing I wanted to ask you as a fan and as someone who is a fan of Power Rangers and Tommy. His voice, the tone of his voice seems very unnatural. And even when he's having these quote unquote revelations and meeting a brother, with the exception of the time when he's fighting, his voice there's no inflection to his voice whatsoever. And it dries, like, I wish someone would step on his toe at least so I can hear him like, oh my God, oh, I have a brother. None of that. He's like, oh, well, okay. Like, very soft spoken, but it's very evenly toned. I'm like, it's very unnatural, you know?
I know exactly what you're talking about, and you you framed it and you phrased it better than I would have been able to, and I'm glad you got there first, because I was thinking that as I was watching, and these episodes especially, because again, it is a very personal look at him. Over the course of There's No Business Like Snow Business, he gets the Dear John letter from Kimberly, who of
Yeah.
course had previously left the
Delivered
show.
to the Angel Grove Youth Center too, by the way. Not his house, but it's mailed there.
Oh, there's a lot we need to talk about with that letter. But in that arc, he's nursing a broken heart as feelings are starting to emerge from Kat towards Tommy, while Tommy
Right.
himself is having a little bit of a spark with this professional snowboarder, Heather Thompson, played by Sarah Brown, who came over from the VR Troopers show.
Yeah.
And we get a lot of these lengthy sequences of snowboarding. And we'll talk about that. This could have been a two-parter. This was
This
one of my main
was
takeaways.
this was just a long Juicy Fruit commercial.
Yes,
It
essentially.
was oh man.
And then in the subsequent arc, again, Tommy has all of this inner turmoil, and he goes on this vision quest, and he meets the brother he never knew he had. And so that's, I think, what I was most struck by in looking at this 7 episode block, and what I was actually most impressed by, despite whatever limitations we might have seen, especially in terms of the writing or the acting, but the fact that, again, I don't know that we've seen stories to this level before. There's usually some sort of personal struggle that a character has. I mean, even going back to, I think, episode 2 of Mighty Morphin, when Trini had her fear of heights and she
Mhm.
had to get over it to help Billy. There's always some sort of personal problem that they have that they
Right.
need to work through. But, again, they're usually more superficial. So here, a broken heart, long lost family member. I appreciated the territory that they were going into,
Mhm.
but the upshot of that is it required, I think, a little bit more on the acting side than perhaps was able to be achieved, because I was thinking about that too, and the voice, and what I kept going back to was, and this probably maybe isn't even the most accurate word, but whiny. I mean, I just felt like everything he was saying just had that tone to it.
Yeah, or lack of tone, really. I mean, he was dead. He was dead inside. I mean, there was more reaction and feeling out of I keep forgetting her name. The
Cat?
snowboard
Oh,
no, the
Heather.
snowboard Heather, out of her being stood up more or less but like the second or third time. Like she was like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, okay, look, there's some emotion. That's how you're supposed to feel. Meanwhile, he got a Dear John letter at the youth center in the middle of his workout from a girl that he was actually legit dating. And that's all you got to do? Like, okay,
Oh
I'm going to put down
man.
my weights.
Oh
Oh,
man. It's a lot of
I got to,
that.
yeah. Oh. Now, I've seen him speak in real life, and his voice does get louder. And so, I mean, come on, guys. Like, let's do it. But
Yeah, I think
yeah.
this just might be an instance of we've kind of hit a wall as far as acting ability. Maybe
Yeah.
also some shortcomings in the direction department because I don't know, maybe with the right coaching, something more could have been elicited. I don't know.
I still come back to, I think there was, there, yes, there certainly there was an acting issue there. But I think, that also falls on the shoulders of the director and producers because they're the people behind the scenes making this happen. So I think through things I've read over the years, like, that whole show was in a bit of like they were unsure of what to do, and they didn't know how they were necessarily going to proceed because, you know, okay, we've exhausted the Mighty Morphin stuff, what we could do with that. How are we going to go forward? And I get, I know they had their plans of, okay, well, there's other teams and other incarnations of this. How are we going to do that? And I guess there was some uncertainty behind the scenes. So I think maybe the show suffered as a result of that because, afterwards, like the show hit their stride and it did kind of peak and valley a few times over the years. And now I guess they're really kind of sailing along. I mean, I haven't really watched the newest version of whatever my son watches. He seems to like it, but they certainly have much more production, higher production value. They shoot more of their own footage versus repurposing old stuff. So yeah, I think maybe, it was, you know, maybe a little bit of both.
Well, this is certainly an interesting time, and we talked about this in the last episode where we covered the transition from Mighty Morphin to Zeo, and
Hmm.
this is kind of a unique spot, I guess, in the history of the franchise because, as we talked about, like they held back so long on switching the powers and the costumes to keep that familiarity and that consistency, but then again,
Yeah.
they had exhausted the footage, and look, I think they finally realized, well, hey, we have an opportunity to sell all new toys, so they
Right.
finally pulled the trigger and shifted to Zeo. And, we spent a lot of time on this in the last episode. I think they did a great job of kind of creating that transition and carrying you along and making you just feel like this was all one story. But then I guess the flip side of it, and this is where this diverges. Well, I guess it'll continue into Turbo, but you know, very shortly after this, they'll start adhering to the new cast, new costumes,
Right.
new powers every season. But like they were still hanging on to our cast and our ongoing storyline. But again, like I said, I mean, I did feel like they were at least moving into newer territory here and a little bit more
Yeah.
mature material, still within the confines of a Fox Kids
Right.
show. But I did
Right.
appreciate it. But listen, we got to talk about this Dear John letter.
Yes.
So of course, as we've talked about when we did our big Pink Ranger episode, Kimberly had departed. She's going to train for the Olympics and gymnastics, and everyone was really supportive. One of the things that I kind of bumped up against in Kimberly's farewell, I love that Tommy was supportive, great, but there was not a word of discussion about their relationship, right? There wasn't even anything like, oh, like, we'll stay together and write each other, or I gotta
Yeah.
let you go, Kim. Like maybe we'll link up down the line. Like there was nothing one way or the other. And again, I'm skipping episodes, so I don't know if there was any reference in other episodes of Tommy keeping in touch, them doing a long distance thing. My gut is probably not. I think it probably wasn't.
There was one episode, and this wasn't Zeo. This was like the kind of in between um, Mighty Morphin and Zeo, I think, where they had
Oh, the Alien
um,
Rangers.
the Alien Rangers, and it was around there. I'm not probably not being exact with it, but it was around there. And there was a scene where they're kind of the new Rangers are off, like looking toward during that like teen summit nonsense that was going on, and Jason and Kimberly and who else was it? Trini?
Oh, well,
I
so
forget.
so Alien Rangers was, after those characters had long departed. But so if it was still
Right, but
Jason, Zach, and Trini,
they revisited those characters at some point. So they go to see them, and they're off in the distance, and there's a shot of the three characters like kind of walking away, and you just see like a behind the head shot of them, and they're kind of like waving to them, like, "Oh, look, there they are. They're doing great." I'm like, that's it. That's how you're gonna bring back those characters or revisit them. Of course, it wasn't until like Zeo really gets going, they bring back Jason as the Gold Ranger or something. But like that was the only like revisiting of those characters you saw until really Jason came back. So it was really weak. Certainly could have been done better, but whatever.
but to your point, and I wasn't even thinking about this, but you're right. The fact that the letter gets sent to the juice bar, although in fairness, they are always there. So I guess if you're Kimberly and you're like, I want him to get this as quickly as possible, that
Yeah, no.
probably is the place to send it. I'll
Yeah,
go with that. What got
he should
me
get it in
was,
front of everybody.
yeah, that's the thing. He's working out, which you and I, but we can both appreciate that, and he's got
Can
another
do that.
set left.
Yeah.
But we know sets don't take that long,
No.
And it was one of those things when he hands it to Adam, and he's like, "Oh, I got to do this set. Like, read it. Read it to me." I'm thinking to myself, of course, clearly he's not anticipating that it's a breakup letter.
No.
However, maybe there's something in there personal, intimate,
Right.
whatever the
Right.
case may be.
Right.
Again, it's still a kid's show. It's very chaste. I'm not suggesting anything crazy here, but anything, just something private between the two
Yeah.
of them. The fact that, and look, we need to get to the point where the rest of the Rangers learn this. I get that, but it was just so bonkers to me. Instead of waiting the 30 seconds to knock out his set and then read it quietly, privately, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
Adam, read this aloud to the juice bar. Insane.
No, Adam, my pre-workout is wearing off. Let's do this now. Let me get the set in. But let's, you read the letter. It's fine. No, there's nothing in there. Yeah, it's so much of that bothered me. And like, inside I was kind of upset at the fact that the two of them, even though they, she was never on the show for a while anyway, but the idea of them they broke up, I'm like, oh, that's kind of sad. I'm like, come on, the Pink Ranger, she was my girl. What are you talking about? So it was, but then those, I don't know, those cat feelings kind of spontaneously grew, out of nowhere. Didn't take long.
We know from the lore of the show that they end up together. They have a kid together, JJ, in the future. So we know where we're headed. There's I think it's this season in Zeo with the Christmas episode, and it's Tommy as an old man talking to his grandkid and telling him a story about the Power Rangers, and then we see his wife come in and it's Kat. So it's like the lore has established these two, and I know a lot of people. Again, we all had crushes on Amy Jo Johnson watching the show. I know a lot of people are all about Tommy and Kim, but I got to tell you, especially after rewatching, because I watched this as a kid, but I really didn't remember a lot of this. Rewatching this three-parter, and I don't care if this is a hot take, controversial, people disagree. That's totally fine.
Do it.
I am Team Kat. I am full on Team Kat. The way she stepped up, put Tommy's feelings first, and we'll get into all of that. I was so impressed, and hand in hand with that, man, did Kim do him dirty with that letter.
Yeah.
I mean, look, delivering that news via letter as opposed to a call. And look, different time period. They're not going to FaceTime or whatever, but it's like still, you could have had a phone call. But what she says in that letter, it was threefold. So the fact that she starts off with, you've always meant a lot to me, like a brother. Brother.
Friend zoned right off the bat.
Yeah, but even worse. I mean, like, I would have understood it more if she's like, you're my best friend. But like a brother, I mean, that's just like salt in the wound. I met someone else, which, look, that happens. It is but that's a tough pill to swallow. But then, where she lost me entirely was, I think you'd like him. Get out of here with that. Oh, I couldn't believe it. That was the last straw for me.
Yeah, it was the 1-2 and uppercut. And I'm like, yeah. Oh, really? I would call her really? I'm going to like him? I'm gonna like him. Why? Why am I gonna like him so much? Tell me. Why? Because he has long hair too.
Well, that's the thing. It's like you'd like. I mean, she doesn't say this explicitly, but like the implication, maybe you guys are similar. It's like, no, don't tell me that. That's worse. Like I would rather hear you say like, oh, I met somebody who's like completely different from you, as opposed to like someone who's just like you. I just prefer him. Oh man,
Yeah, yeah. It was.
still
It
still
was.
upset about this.
Yeah. If we ever run into her at like a convention, I'm gonna be like, "Do you what? What were you thinking?" No. Yeah. It was messed up because I know like if that happened in real life, it would be, you'd buy a calling card and you would call Australia or wherever the hell it was and
She
be
was in
like, I don't care.
Florida. I mean,
Or yeah, whatever. Yeah, Florida. I mean, yeah, it was it was weird. It was weird.
well, it's I guess Tommy's default is just he gets very sad, and we have, my goodness, what an epic montage at the lake as he's reminiscing. But
Hmm.
listen, and I know we can look. We're having some fun at the show's expense, and we can lean into that even more. And I know it's easy to do, and I get that. But I gotta tell you, and maybe because I've been watching so many of these, like I've been sucked back in, and I'm just like, I can suspend my disbelief and get into it. But I'm watching it, and I felt for him as he was walking along and throwing the
Oh
rocks into the
yeah.
lake, and the music's playing. Well, I don't even know
Yep.
what song that was. I tried to find it, but I
I
couldn't.
don't know, but I equated it to, and I don't know if you were a fan of this, but it was my life. It was my Highlander Dust in the Wind scene. If you when Adrian Paul's, Duncan MacLeod's girlfriend Tessa dies, and there's a whole remembering montage, and they play "Dust in the Wind." It would remind me exactly of that, and I'm like, wow, it's just a worse song. So, you know, but here's the thing: like, they never really, with the exception of the two giving each other looks here and there, or when he became, when he made the transition of leaving as the Green Ranger, coming back as the White Ranger, they never really dove into that relationship. So it was kind of refreshing to see like there's legit an on-screen relationship building between Kat and Tommy. Like you can see some affection between these two characters. And, with the exception of, like I said, just looks and maybe a kiss here and there, like there wasn't really a substantial relationship. So, you know, I don't know.
No, I
But
get
that
that's the
letter was
thing.
messed up.
But like that's one of the things I've been tracking as I've been rewatching the episodes that I have been of what sort of relationship did Tommy and Kim have? Because again, I feel like it's talked about more than anything shown. But it's like
Yeah.
they would often have plans. Like in fairness to the show, it's like Tommy would be meeting her at the juice bar to go, have a picnic or go to the
Picnic.
mall or
Right.
so. Like so they did, again, very 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 chaste and all that. But it's like they did have plans. They'd have little dates and stuff like that. But as far as what like, that's the thing. Was it the level of relationship that then would warrant that kind of breakup letter and his reaction? Like, I don't know that the show really ever established, but listen, I'll go
Yeah.
along with it.
Yeah. No, I agree. It was, they, they didn't have the time really to really flesh out that whole relationship thing. And I think that they didn't realize how important it was to fans until after the fact, because conventions and meet and greets with fans, I mean, they had them back in the day, but not like now, or like every month or every other week there's another convention or something going on. So, you know now we reminisce about it, like that was that broke my heart. So
No, for sure. So from very early on, from the moment that Tommy gets that news, we get the first in what will be a series throughout these three episodes of of reaction shots from Kat. Right, so it quickly
hmm.
becomes clear that she feels a certain way about what's happened, and that these feelings are developing. I give them a lot of credit. It was, I think, Douglas Sloan who wrote and directed all three of these. I give them credit because especially for a kid show that didn't really spend a lot of time on this side of things, right?
Hmm.
it would have been really easy to just launch like right into a Tommy and Cat story. And instead, we get the introduction of this Heather character because, Billy and Cat have this idea they would, take Tommy snowboarding to take his mind off of everything. So they go up to the mountains and then they meet again Heather, who again came over from the VR Troop. Did you watch VR Troopers by any chance?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, there were a bunch of these shows that were out at the time, and I would check them out here and there. Um, and yeah, I watched VR Troopers a little, mainly for her because I thought
Sure.
she was cute. I think she went on to like General Hospital or something like that afterwards. She went into like legit acting.
Who she
So
reminded me of, especially watching her in these Sarah Chalk from Scrubs and Roseanne. Like she just reminded me a little bit of
yeah,
that look, and I love Sarah Chalk. But yeah, VR Troopers, I I watched some of it. Like I definitely remember watching some of it, but it was not something that was like huge for me like Power Rangers was. But I have some memory of it.
yeah,
Some little
yeah.
connections
It
there.
was. It's very much of the time. There was VR and computers and matrixy and stuff like that, which at the time was a big thing. We're getting at the time closer and closer to um, Y2K. Like these are all things that are on the horizon. So that was a big deal at the time. And it kind of died, I think, after like a season or two. It wasn't, it didn't really go on beyond that. But I like that she was involved. So
Yeah, it was cool to see her pop up on this, and so once we get past the whole business of the breakup letter, really the bulk of these 3 episodes, again, we have this, trip to the mountains where they meet Heather. And again, we get a lot of extended sequences of snowboarding. I almost
yes.
timed it. Just like, man, I feel like we were on those slopes for quite some time. Again, longer than we really needed to. That's my main critique of this 3-parter. I think as 2 parts, it would have been great. And even when you look at the villain side of this 3-parter, we have the Robo Cupid
Hmm.
monster that Mondo creates to cause the citizens of Angel Grove to fall in love with machines. So we get Ernie caressing a blender and Lieutenant Stone fondling an arcade machine. It's weird. It's a little weird, but we have that, and that takes us through 2 episodes, and then that villain is dispatched with, and then Mondo instantly launches into, well, while they're still recovering from this fight, I'm going to throw another one at them. And it's the defoliator, who starts killing plants and has this greenhouse effect and raises the temperature throughout Angel Grove. So
Yeah.
it just again, I think when you just even in terms of how the villains played out in this, I feel like 2 parts probably would have served this story a little better.
So I'm glad you brought the greenhouse stuff in because it seemed like all of a sudden now this season is starting to bring in more like uh issues like contemporary issues. Okay, the environment. um we get into discussing Native Americans and their involvement in the community and the land, and how they respect the land and all that sort of thing. So like there was more of that um being incorporated into the show versus any other season before. So um I was like, okay, they're taking some liberties now with kind of the messaging and stuff like that, which I'm fine with because kids learn this, and if kids are going to find out that hey, I need to respect my environment and learn to recycle and take care of the planet so we can reduce greenhouse gases, I'm all for it. But um, it I think they could do a better job in how to incorporate these messages into the show versus hitting you over the head with, well, yes, these are greenhouse gases and we need to reduce them by recycling and all. I'm like, whoa, that came out of nowhere.
Yes, it's a bit on the nose, especially when they're in the command center, the power chamber, and
Yes.
all of the Rangers are sharing what they know, and Zordon's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
you're all very well informed. I'm proud of you." It's like, all right, but
Thanks, Zordon.
again, I appreciate the intent, even if maybe it could have done with a more subtle approach. But I
Oh,
was
yeah.
still on board with it. But so again, I mean, so this is kind of the setup for these episodes, and uh, Heather seems to take a liking to Tommy pretty early on, certainly even more so after he saves her. So there's this whole sequence where the cogs are sent to the mountains, and this made me chuckle. Kat has to contend with them, and their whole evil plan is to move the safety markers from the slopes, which, I mean, it proves to be effective because without that, Heather actually, careens off the mountain and she's holding
Yep.
on to this one lone branch until Tommy has the idea to tie everyone's coats together and make a rope. And again, that further endears him to her, and she seems to be quite smitten. He's, again, not really feeling it, but it kind of goes along with it a little bit.
And who
But
would have thought they'd be such good snowboarders too?
they're just good at everything. I mean, it's like when you go back to the Mighty Morphin movie, and it starts with them skydiving and then rollerblade. Like they land and then they just start
Yeah.
rollerblade. Like they're good at everything.
But the cogs too, they were like snowboarding. They even had like the cheesy like 90s spiky hats, you
Yeah,
know. I'm like, wow, they just need the giant pants too, and they're all like in the decade, man.
I guess they can be programmed with these various skills. So
This is true. Yes. Yes, I'm
I
sorry.
could go along with that, but it just felt, again, they did create quite the danger in removing the
Hmm.
markers, but it just felt like real small potatoes for these evil machines. Like that was
Yes.
their objective.
Yeah, I let's face it, as it pertains to evil you know, henchmen, if they really wanted to do something, they could create an avalanche or like I don't know. But I think that was one of the things that really stuck out at me about the new the anniversary show is that they said kill.
Yes.
You know, they never said. They usually say something, kill adjacent. Oh, I'm going to destroy them. I'll get them. That type of stuff. And Rita was like, no, I'm going to kill them. Okay, and I killed the Yellow Ranger. I killed Trini. I'm like, oh wow, they're not holding back. So it was, I think new Rita probably could have kicked the old Rita's ass.
Yeah, that special definitely raised the stakes,
Yeah,
and certainly, the gloves were off compared to what we had experienced as kids watching this.
yeah,
So we get, there are a few instances now. I guess it happens first here on the slopes after they save Heather. It happens later when Tommy and Heather have plans for dinner, and it happens yet again in one of the later episodes when after Kat sets up that beautiful dinner
hmm,
for Tommy and Heather, where Tommy has to go off on Ranger business. And it's the
right.
classic superhero thing. It's Clark Kent needing to make an excuse. Oh, I forgot I had a haircut appointment. I got to go. But Tommy doesn't even go that far. I don't know why this bothered me so much, but it's just like each time he's like, we gotta go, and she's like, why? He's like, I wish I could explain. Before I give my whole spiel, how did you feel about that?
It was lame. It was really lame. I mean, it's again no feeling, and she just met this guy, and she is exuding all this emotion. Like, you're kidding me again? You're doing this, you know? And he's like, oh yeah, I gotta go. I'm just going outside, but I gotta go. And it was, yeah, it was kind of lame,
Wait,
like
what?
I
Actually,
get,
no, I don't mean to cut you up, but like now I have a
yeah.
question because in my mind I was reading Tommy during all of the Heather interactions as like he's not really into her, whether it's because he's still just too hung up and caught up with the breakup, and or he's I don't know, he's just not that into her. But now as we talk more about the performance, I don't know, was that your reading, or do you think he was meant to be but it just wasn't coming across?
I think well, as a person who has, just as a human being, he was in a relationship, just broke up, and you would think that natural instincts, he's not really into her. He's trying to move on with his life, but he's like, internally he's like, oh, this is happening a little too fast. I'm still trying to process the feelings that I had, but at the same time, I'm a superhero and I got to do this thing. So, that's a lot for anyone to, just trying to equate that. Like, if you're in a relationship, you break up with somebody, but at the same time, you're dealing with a crisis of let's say, a sick relative or something like that, or someone passing away. You got to process this, but at the same time, your other relationships are suffering. So that's how I was kind of equating it. But at the same time, he moves on relatively fast to Kat right afterwards. So all that I had processed, I'm like, no, it's right out the window. He wasn't into her. That's the only thing I could think of, because if he has no problem warming up to Kat, you know, then maybe it's just he wasn't into her all that much.
You know, this is not stated explicitly, and I'm probably reading too much into it, but you know what? If we're going to psychoanalyze a little bit here, he just got broken up with by this gymnast, this Olympian
Yeah.
in training, right?
I mean, if we want to look at it adult wise, come on.
And that, and now I don't know. I think we were
I mean,
going
yeah,
down different avenues there, but no,
she
what
was
I
a
was thinking is,
gymnast.
it's like, but now here's this professional snowboarder,
Yeah.
right? Like another athlete who's training. I don't know. I feel like he was probably like, no, like I've been down this road before, sort of thing.
Yeah, but isn't Kat somewhat of an athlete? I mean, she like,
Yes, it
I
had
mean,
been
I
established she
don't,
was this swimmer. She was like an Olympic swimmer, and then she hurt herself diving in a dive, and then she quit swimming
right.
for a long time, and then she got back in. But I don't think she ever fully got back into it. I think there was, I don't know, maybe enough of a separation there. I don't know. But what I was going to say was the lack of any kind of excuse as to why he had to leave really bothered me, because and no one helps him. You know, this is the other thing.
Yeah.
Billy, I feel, really dropped the ball as a wingman here, because all they could have said, any one of them could have said to Heather, like, oh, we have a job. We have an after school job. Whatever. And you make up anything. Oh, and which is
Yep.
honestly not even really a lie.
No, no, it's not. It's all in the wording.
Exactly. So again, not to nitpick, and I guess maybe the counter argument is, Zordon wouldn't want them to lie, maybe, so that's why. But it's so awkward to just be like, oh, I have to go. Why? I can't tell you.
Yeah. I can't tell you. You don't really know me, but just trust me enough to know that I got to do a thing, but it's worth it. Like it's a little weak in that sense. So, yeah, and they were right there. They were right behind them too. They could have been like, "Yo, your uncle is dying," or something to that effect. I don't think Zordon would have been like, "Oh, you lied to her." That's not nice. I'm like, well, Kimberly broke up with me. That wasn't nice either. So,
I know.
you know,
I feel like if Billy had made up an excuse for Zordon, would have been like that, like, good job, like you were a good bro today, Billy.
yeah,
I feel like
good
Zordon would
looking
have been
out.
on board. Yeah, I feel like Zordon would have been fine with that. Speaking of Zordon, I'm going to jump around a little bit here because there were two things that really struck me in this 7-episode stretch. So when Tommy and Kat, when I forget at which point it is that they leave when this happens, but when they join the rest of the Zeo Rangers in battle against, why do I keep blanking on this monster's name? Robo Cupid, right?
Yeah,
One of the core tenets of Zordon's philosophy, right? There's the 3 rules, and we've heard this multiple times. Every time someone new comes on, you don't reveal your identity, you don't use your powers for personal gain, and you don't escalate a conflict. And with Robo Cupid, typically, as we all know, the sequence with these fights is they fight the monsters on the ground, then the monster grows, then they call the Zords.
right.
They called the Zeo Zords before Robo Cupid grew. And they used that
Yeah,
wheel. I mean, so in fairness, it wasn't like they just tried to stomp, but still, I feel like the calling of the Zords was an escalation in violation of Zordon's rule. I mean, I want to get your take and audience. If maybe I'm being too harsh here, or too much of a stickler with these rules, but I feel like that was a violation.
yeah. There's a formula to these shows. They fight the foot soldiers, or the bad guys group of soldiers. Then they morph. Then it escalates. They fight the monster. The monster physically gets larger. Then they call the Zords. The Zords come together. Da da da. And things were out of sequence in this. So they introduced this stupid wheel, which was weird. But do you know what really put me off about this? Is that so after between Mighty Morphin and then when they get new Zords and Mighty Morphin, each time they're more or less leveling up. They get stronger and stronger. Their Zords are stronger than the previous incarnation, etc. In Zeo, there are Zords quite literally towing the legs of this configuration. How is that in any way beneficial?
That's a fair point.
That in of itself makes no sense to me. Let alone the fact that they have a giant stupid pyramid that all it does is tilt, and it just is a big fat robot, which comes out, I don't know, once, twice. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, the person who's designing this, like, or decided to make this translation between Japanese and US for merchandising sake, it was silly because it never really made sense to me. And the one thing that was kind of goofy but actually made sense in terms of functionality was the red, like the new red
The Battle Zord.
Battle Zord, which in and of itself makes sense because it's a functional robotic looking thing that mimics the driver's motions. So of course he had to clear his mind for it to work properly. Otherwise it looked like it was batting a giant bee or something like that. But that made sense. Not like a griffin or some other mythical creature that just doesn't do anything, and it's not towing legs. So like it that bumped into me. I bumped into that a bit while watching this, but that's just me being a curmudgeon, I think.
No, I get it. I mean, I think maybe one way we can sort of reconcile it is that for the American show, they made Zeo the next level, but
Yeah.
that was not right the original intention. That was just another Sentai series, right?
Right.
So, but here it was like, oh, now you're more powerful and you have better Zords, and maybe that wasn't necessarily the intention, but yeah, it is hard to see how the pulling would necessarily be a strategic advantage. But and
Yeah, that was sorry, and this was a little off topic, but it's just in relation to the new show, um, Once and Always, is that you come to find out that all of these teams kind of coexist.
yes,
Like, they're all out there in one form or another. They're all there, and of course there were some continuity issues I had because I thought we got rid of Mighty Morphin, like they were done, but they keep popping up. Anytime there's an anniversary or like the all red team, they're all there. Like, okay, and Tommy has like the
the Master
legacy,
Morpher.
the Master Morpher, which I will say that was just awesome. Um, but I thought we got rid of all those powers at some point. But he's still the Green Ranger.
Yeah, we talked about that when we did Once and Always. I feel like, especially seeing in Once and Always the role that Billy had assumed
Yeah,
within the organization,
yeah,
I kind of chalk it up to like he figured out how to bring these powers back, and
yeah,
it's just happened off screen, and that's how they've been able to do it. So, but yeah, I mean that was something that I always thought about whenever we got one of those legacy episodes, one of those anniversary specials, and it was just like, wait, how is this happening?
yeah.
But
Suspension of disbelief, I guess.
like I said, that to me felt like a violation of one of the rules. And then I'm going to skip ahead to the Arrowhead arc. Tommy reveals his identity to his brother. He takes
Mm-hmm.
off his helmet as the Red Zeo Ranger and reveals
Yes.
that he's Tommy. And I get it. I don't begrudge him his decision. And ultimately, I think Zordon would understand as well. But it was shocking to me that it was not acknowledged in any way in the episode. And they could have taken any number of tracks. It could have been Tommy, like Tommy could have gotten ahead of it and said to Zordon, like, hey, oh man, like I revealed my identity. Like, I'm sorry, Zordon. I know it goes against one of your rules. And I'm sure Zordon would have said, well, it's okay. It's an exception.
Yeah.
Or if, Zordon had brought it up to him. I mean, however they had handled it, but to just not address it at all felt odd.
They could always do it in any creative way. Like, there's an emergency, he morphs, and his brother is just out of eyesight from Tommy, and he sees him do it. Or there's an emergency happening right then and there, he has to do it, or everyone's going to be harmed. Like, those are believable things, regardless of the, you know, the rules. Even Green Lanterns will, power up if they have to. Superman will take off his Clark Kent get up if he has to, given the situation. So, you know, they could have done it creatively better rather than just have him the dude have a hissy fit and have him back him down by taking off his helmet.
No, that's fair. I mean, again, it didn't even bother me so much how it happened, but I don't disagree with you. I think there are other ways they could have done it. It was just, I just feel like it's been such a big deal about these rules, and it just
Yeah.
felt like a missed opportunity to address
Or he could have
a
said,
violation.
he was like, "Oh, Tommy's in trouble. I got to," and he could have said, "No, no, no, no. I got him. He's good. Like I moved him from there to there. He's fine. Now let me go bring you to him." Like they could have done that. Rather than like, "No, dude, chill. Here, look, I'm him." Like any. There's so many other ways that they could have handled that better.
I know. Well, Tommy was all messed up in that arc, which we'll get more into in a second. I just going back to Snow Business, and we're talking about the lameness of Tommy, trying to get away from Heather to go be a Power Ranger. It did lead though to what I felt was a genuinely funny moment where they're about to enjoy their dinner at the youth center that Kat has set up for them, and Rocky and Adam come in to get Tommy, and Adam, props to Johnny Young Bosch, because I feel like his delivery was great. Where he was like, he turns to Rocky, he's like, "This isn't going to go over well." like that we have to interrupt, and Tommy has to drop this girl again, and he's like, "This isn't going to go over well," and it was just that just felt like such a real moment. That truly made me laugh.
But again, that's the point where they could have jumped in and
Yes,
really. Can you stop doing that, please? My son is being a little antsy.
that's okay.
Like they could have totally just jumped in and been a bro and be like, "Look, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt this, but we really have an emergency." That can you stop? We're recording something. Thank you. Sorry.
Sorry, we have a guest appearance by Joe's son.
Yeah,
It's all good.
something you get to look forward to. Um,
I know
but yeah,
our son
it
is
was.
still young enough. We still have the gates,
Oh,
on the at the top of the stairs. So it's like he literally
yeah.
can't get
I
down here.
missed. I miss those days. I miss the days of gates and
He's
all
although
that.
now a lot of times if I say like I'm going downstairs, he's like I want to come too, and and that's fine. And I've shown him all the. I know I feel bad because it's like I have all these toys down, like all these
Dude.
figures,
Oh my goodness. Yes.
as you do, and our people
Yeah,
who are
it's a
watching on YouTube can see right behind you.
yeah, no, and there's so many more. And when they were younger, they're like, "But you have all these toys." I'm like, "Yeah, but they're just to look at, not to play with." So,
But and I agree, like Rocky and Adam, they could have been bros. They didn't. But I gotta say, I think that the thing I was probably most impressed with in this arc was the maturity of Kat and the show, because again, you
mhm,
watch this whole sequence where she's putting together this dinner, like this fancy dinner. She's setting the table and laying out all the utensils, and then like it's a lovely presentation, and she's getting all dressed up, and if it had been that she was just doing it for her and Tommy, we would have gone along with it, right? And
mhm,
they make you think that, right? Like Tommy shows up all dressed up because he got this invitation, and then instantly she's like, "Oh, Mr. Oliver, your table's ready," and you realize she set this up for the two of them,
right,
because even though she's developed these feelings for Tommy, she wants him to be happy more than anything else, and
right.
has seen him spending time with this girl and thinks that's what he wants. And I just thought it was again surprisingly mature for the character and the show, and it really, really made me even more Team Cat.
Yes, I agree with you. It was very much. It was like something out of Full House. It was like Stephanie and DJ getting Uncle Jesse and Becky on a date after they had like an argument. One of those types of things. And they sent this person and that person invitations to meet at this spot at the same time. They get there and the two of them meet like, "Oh, well, you're here. Oh, you're here. Oh, we might as well have dinner." One of those types of things. And it was kind of heavy-handed in the fact that you start to realize like, "Oh, well, clearly Kat has feelings, but she is, again, like you said, she would much rather Tommy be happy than, you know, even if it means, at the price of our own feelings. So
And to the show's credit, there's not a lot that's said about this. They convey
yeah,
so much through her looks. And, she has a line to Tanya where she's like, because I think Tanya says, like, oh, like, that was such a nice thing you did. And she's like, yeah, or a stupid thing.
yeah,
And I appreciated the show not spelling it out 100% for the audience because they could
yeah,
have. And I feel like it would have been in keeping with the show if she was like, well, because, I actually really like Tanya. Like, they didn't need to do that.
yeah.
Again, I think we got a different amount of mileage out of out of these
Yeah,
episodes.
yeah, I agree. I agree. One thing that really kind of I had a bit of started to remember with this show is that all of a sudden now we're getting a lot of Bulk and Skull, and their stories really have absolutely Michael, you have to stop. Sorry, guys.
It's okay.
Um, have absolutely nothing to do with the story. Like previously was we have to find out who the Power Rangers are. That made sense. Okay, there's a connection to the larger arc. Now these two are just Abbott and Costelloing their way through the show for no reason whatsoever other than some type of comic relief, but it's just it's not even funny though anymore. Like it didn't make any sense. Bulk cut his hair. I mean, look, for me at the time, I actually still had hair and it was long. And this is when Metallica cut their hair and then Bulk cut his hair. Like everyone with long hair was getting it cut. So this was a very hard time.
I understand. I will say I do think the season where they were trying to figure out the Rangers' identity, that was the best because we had moved past them as the bullies, but they
Right.
still had a reason to be kind of in the mix. And then with season 3 of Mighty Morphin, that's when they become members of the Junior Police Patrol, and that continues into this season. And later on, they'll all get kicked off the force, and then Stone opens up a private detective agency, and they go to work there. And yes, they do
That's right.
become, I guess, more tangential. But and the audience has heard my evolution over the course of these episodes. I've really kind of come around on Bulk and Skull. I used to find them a lot more grating, and now I don't mind them so much. And some of their bits I actually do find amusing. In this stretch of episodes, this is the point where they still have Rito and Goldar who have lost their memories essentially as pets.
Yeah.
So there's that whole business, and of course they're working for Lieutenant Stone, who, again, I know I'm overthinking this, and it's like we have to have a setup and we have to have these episodes or storylines for Bulk and Skull, but it's like Bulk and Skull are so clearly incompetent, yet
Hmm.
Lieutenant Stone continues to give them important missions,
Right.
right? To watch over his flowers before the contest. And of
Right.
course that goes awry because we have the defoliator who's killing plants. They have to sell these raffle tickets, and they keep getting outsold by this guy named Delmar, who ends up being the son of the chief of police. Again, it's these like simple little
Right.
comedic setups to these things, but it's just funny to me. It's like if these guys are so inept, why why are you entrusting them with anything?
I even back then and now more so, I always thought there has to be something more to these two characters for them to be there. I don't know if there's something behind the scenes. They had an intention of introducing them for a reason beyond just them being the silly bully types, just to kind of cause aggravation for their Power Rangers and in their civilian, identities. Because there really is no reason for it because they just well they take up time in the overall story arc. Like logically, okay, it's less time for them to create, you know, stuff. So now it's filler basically. But like, god damn, they could have done something different. Like it just, their music is like goofy clown music. Do 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 do. Like, oh come on, guys. Like,
I know. I mean, I think yes, I think just from a practical standpoint, it was right to kind of take up enough of the episode where it can
yeah,
alleviate the because they were cranking these out and filming multiple episodes in a week. And again, they weren't filming entire episodes, just the pieces that they needed of the kids. And so yeah, I think this kind of just let some of that weight and pressure off of the other actors. And they knew they had a few minutes of each
Yeah.
episode that they could reserve for Bulk and Skull. Keeping in mind too, it's like made for kids, so this idea of like these two clowns, which is I don't think is
Yeah.
inaccurate, like kind of bumbling around, like the kids will find that amusing. I think narratively, we're really getting really getting into this here, but I
Yeah.
think
No, we're really analyzing.
having non-ranger characters, just like normal people in this world, I do think is helpful and gives you a little bit of context for how the world kind of perceives us. I mean, one of the episodes that we looked at, Stone gives them this psychological evaluation and the Rorschach test, and like everything they see is a monster. But it's like
Yeah.
in Angel Grove, that's actually an advantage
Right.
because they're
Yeah.
constantly under monster attacks. I
Yeah.
also, and I don't know if this had been established previously, but there's this whole siren system, right? Like when the monster attack is over, they
Yeah.
like the
There's an all
alarm goes off.
clear.
Yeah, and it's like, well, wow, that makes sense that they would have
Yeah.
like they're constantly
Yes.
under attack.
Yeah. That
So
totally makes sense.
so I've come around a lot on Bulk and Skull, so much so that one of the only things I didn't like about Once and Always, because it was I did an hour and a half on it. I loved it, but no Bulk and Skull. I mean, they had that little the billboard with them on it, but it was
Yes.
just like I felt like it was missing a little something.
Yeah, and I I genuinely love that show. And it was a lot of fun. There's a lot missing from it, that I would love to have seen. And it's, I for everything um that Jason David Frank was a part of over the years, just all the side Power Ranger stuff that he's been involved in, it really bummed me out that he wasn't a part of this, which was filmed way before he passed away. So, even his scenes, were done, that stuff was done way before. Um, and I mean, I know that there were some issues with like Kimberly and negotiation wise, but like for it to not have Tommy in there, in some form, I mean, he has a legacy morpher. I mean, he could have been in it as two Rangers. So, you know, it was yeah, there were some elements that were really, missing. Again though, but it did a great job. Um a lot of fun. Even the Chitty Chitty Bang Bang car was cool. Um and Trini's daughter I thought was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, for anyone who hasn't listened to our episode on it, I encourage you to check it out. And one of the things, just real quick, that we did talk about was, yeah, I mean, we would have loved if all of the originals had been able to be there.
Yeah.
And at the same time, though, it created space for Billy and Zach, and that was the
Yes.
one thing that we kind of really came to in our discussion, which is, if Tommy and Jason and Kimberly had been there, they would have dominated. And I mean, I don't know, maybe they would have found a way to kind of spread the wealth among the characters, but out of necessity, it really became a Billy and Zach story, and
It was, yeah.
they hadn't been there since they left. Whereas,
Hmm.
I mean, not Amy Jo Johnson, although she came back for the Turbo movie. So it's like all of the
Yeah.
others have been back in some capacity over the years, but these two had not. So I think, not the most ideal scenario, but I think they made the most of it. But in any event, kind of circling back here, we've been spending the majority of our time here on this. There's no business like snow business, but I do want to at least touch on this Arrowhead arc. So comprised of 4 episodes: Inner Spirit, Challenges, Found and Lost, and Brother, Can You Spare an Arrowhead? So this was a true arc, not a multi-part event, but a true arc. And it opens with, we don't have to go scene by scene through the whole thing, but just like the setup for this, where Tommy's having this nightmare, right? And he's remembering the Zeo quest that he had gone on during the Alien Rangers miniseries when he had been de-aged and he was a kid, and he met Sam Trueheart, who gave him the arrowhead. And then he segues into this nightmare scenario where the Zeo Megazord is being drained and damaged. And he goes to the power chamber in the middle of the night and wakes up Alpha, and they're running these tests, and
Hmm.
he's really kind of out of sorts. And then of course this coincides with this Native American arts exhibit that's happening at the youth center. I mean, this youth center, man, is quite the hub. In the next episode, they're going to have boxing lessons led by Lieutenant Stone, which I don't know if
Yep.
you noticed his shirt, but Jerry the Rock Stone.
Yeah.
And man, did I get a kick out of that. I thought that was great.
Yeah, yeah, that was. I noticed that right off the bat. It was pretty funny, but I always it was very typical, like uh, police boxing. It's like an old, not I would say old trope, but it is. It's an old trope. But the police in their spare time, what are they doing? No, they're boxing. Like old school, like boxing, like put up your dukes and big you know gloves and stuff like that. And it's you know you're not letting me do this, kids, man.
What made me laugh was it seemed like all they did for that whole first lesson was just jump rope. It felt like that was all they. And then at the end, he's like, "I'll see you guys next week." It's like, they're really very methodical, very
You got to
slow,
train
slow
before you
build
even
here.
pick up the gloves. You got to
Yes,
really. It's
yes,
not hard. How hard you hit.
that's right. Yeah, this Rocky fan was very pleased with this boxing episode. With Punch a
Yeah.
Bunch was our villain for that one. So again, it's like we do have this bigger picture of Tommy working through what he's working through, but within that we get sort of like classic Power Rangers episodes, right? Like they're learning how to box, and then the villain is a boxer, and
Right.
the climax is this boxing match between the Zord and the Moss. So all that stuff was fun, but and again, just to kind of run down the villains real quick. So in the first episode, it's Main Drain, who drains the power from the Zord, just like Tommy had his dream about, and that necessitates calling in the red battle Zord that Tommy
Hmm.
controls. But unlike the other ones that have a more of a mechanical operation, this one is dialed into Tommy's mind and his emotional state. So since he's out of sorts, he has having a very hard time controlling the Zord until he realizes it's not about exerting control over the Zord, but rather becoming one with the Zord. And then he's
Of
able to
course.
do what he needs to do. But
Right.
this like performance anxiety that he has continues over a couple of episodes because they get to the point where they want to merge the Battle Zord with the Zeo Megazord. And the
Yeah.
interface isn't working because he can't get himself together there. So
Right.
I thought that played out well as a sort of the consequence of his inner struggle.
I thought this arc was good. It just went on too long. Like they really could have condensed it, and it would have made it better. There was too much of, you're spending like just the shots or the scenes were just much longer than they needed to be. And like if they were, if each shot was half as long as it was, I think it would have been a much tighter. Um, the pace would have been faster. It would have exuded more emotion, because if you're leaving, you're hanging on these characters and they're still having a hissy fit, at some point you come down from that. So I think just in terms of pacing a show, like they could have just made it a little bit faster and it would have been a little bit more interesting. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was cool. We're getting more of Tommy, his like family. He was adopted.
Okay,
That came out. I'm like, oh well, Tommy was adopted. Okay, here we go.
so
Apparently,
on
you're
that
Native American or something. I don't know what you are now.
that too. So on that note, so yeah, this whole thing where he's having this dream and then he runs into Sam Trueheart at this Native American exhibit and gives him a ride, and then he just kind of like fades away, and Tommy's very confused, and they link up again, and Sam sends him on this vision quest into the mountains, and it gets interrupted at one point. Tommy has to teleport out and become a ranger. He comes back, and
Right.
he sees this other man who looks just like him, who also fades away, and they eventually link up, and we find out that this is his long lost brother David Trueheart,
Right.
who was adopted by Sam. And in that moment, Tommy goes, "Oh, I was adopted too." And I said, "You were?" And
No
so
shit.
I reached out to one of our previous guests, Lance Laster from the Always Hold On to Arrow podcast. And, unlike ourselves who watched for a time and then stopped and have been away from the franchise for a long time, Lance has continued watching. And so I
Oh
always
wow.
like getting his perspective because he knows far more. He's very knowledgeable about the franchise generally. And I messaged him just like shortly before we did this, and he got right back to me. I was like, "So when Tommy says he was adopted, was there any reference to this previously? And Lance was not 100% sure, but he didn't think so. So, and that's my instinct as well. It's like I really feel like this was the first time this was, which is fine. I don't think there's anything that was ever said or established in a prior episode that contradicts it. But it just felt like this is pretty big information to just kind of like throw out there.
It's something that should have come up in his relationship with Kim. You know, like when you're sharing information with somebody, certainly if you knew it, you know, and you're sharing personal bits and pieces of your life, that's a big deal, you know, and that's something that should have come up in one way or the other. And just for it to be, you know, just to be kind of brought out as a plot point, you know, just to move the story along, like, ugh, it was a little jarring, you know. But I remember when that character came out and then finding out later on, like, oh, that was really his brother.
Yep.
In real life. So that was pretty interesting.
Very interesting. So David, Tommy's brother, was played by Jason David Frank's real life brother, Eric Frank, who very sadly passed away in 2001, not too long after this. And from what I was reading online, similarly had taken his own life, just as Jason David Frank would do far more recently. So a very sad, you know, tragic family history there. And I was not aware of that. And, you know, watching it as a kid, I didn't have any conception that was his actual brother, you know, playing him. I mean, you definitely see the resemblance, but you know, this was kind of new now as I was going through this again. So yeah, very sad in terms of the real life family history. But, you know, Tommy connects with his brother, who is also into martial arts, and they spar at the youth center.
Of course.
But David gets upset because he feels like Tommy is kind of, showing him up and embarrassed him and, you know, kind of laid him out. And then he's instantly captured by Mondo, who is aware of this arrowhead. You know, Tommy and David each had half of this arrowhead, and fused together, it has some sort of power that Mondo wants to take for himself. So, you know, takes David to force an exchange, which Tommy goes along with. Tommy makes a bad call here in thinking that Mondo will keep his word and release David. And of course he doesn't. And it turns out if you hold the arrowhead to a particular magical stone in the forest, you can command all of these other monsters. And of course the Rangers are able to stop Mondo. But it was, what I thought was kind of cool was that it's not often you see the Rangers face to face with the big bad. Obviously they're fighting the minions constantly, but it's just like there were Mighty Morphin episodes we've covered recently or one in particular, where Tommy fought Zed. And it's like, this is amazing. Like, I can't, this is incredible. So to see Tommy in particular, like face to face with Mondo, I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah. Especially since I was like, though that character doesn't exist in the United States in any form. I always thought it was just, you know, it was over in Japan somewhere. And, like, oh no, they actually got that suit and brought it over. Same thing with like Goldar when, you know, Tommy, when they started interacting with Goldar and stuff like that. And yeah, so that was, that's always interesting to see. But at the same time, you would think that, okay, this character has been trying to defeat the Power Rangers for, you know, a while now, and he's a foot away from him. Just blast him. You're done. The series is over.
Yeah.
You know, like you won, buddy. But no, I'm going to arrange a whole thing, and it's going to be some convoluted story. But yeah, whatever.
I said in the last episode that I think I'm coming to understand a little bit more why I stopped watching towards the end of Zeo, and I feel like whether it was conscious or not, Mondo is not nearly as compelling. Mondo and Machina and Sprocket and Orbis and Clank are not nearly as compelling as Rita and Zed and Goldar and that whole crew. And I guess maybe I've warmed slightly to them, or it's more I've just gotten used to them, I think, as I've been rewatching more of the Zeo episodes. But yeah, they really don't hold a candle. And I think, I mean, it's a matter of the personalities, but also at least with our previous crew, with Rita, you saw her face.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, because again, all of the other ones were masks, and that was it. But at least you had Rita, and you had that emotion and that personal
Right.
connection, and that went a long way. And she was the representative for the group in that sense. And you don't have any of that here. Like, they're all just the
No.
machines.
Yeah, I don't. I will say that Rita and then Zed more so, and Zed. Zed was the best villain in any of those shows. I mean, just style wise, holy cow! Look at him. He's just sinewy muscle with chrome stuff here and there. I mean, that's totally badass. I mean, there's nothing more badass than that. Um, and he's jacked for. I mean, first of all, look at that. But then I read the reason of how he became that way in the comics, and that was even more metal. I was holy cow, that was so cool. He was a good guy. He's part of Zordon's crew, and then he touched a thing, and it made the thing, and his skin went away, and all that. So, yeah, it was cool. So, like any incarnation of these, like these goofy robotic characters. I mean, they don't really emote any type of like evil emotion or feeling that has surpassed what Zed did. So
For sure. I will say the one thing, and I didn't realize this when we did our last episode, but I was looking up the cast a little bit more, and in terms of the voices of the Machine Empire, Queen Machine is Alex Bornstein from The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
really,
Yeah, apparently she's a huge voice actor, which I didn't know, and she's done a bunch of stuff.
that I knew she was into voice stuff because that's something I've been studying lately, but I didn't know she did that. I mean, I know Bryan Cranston did a bunch of stuff there,
Yeah.
which is why they brought him in, and he was so willing to do it. But I didn't know she was.
So
But I
there's
guess there are a
that.
lot of people who've done voices on that show.
And then Barbara Goodson, who did the voice of Rita, is Prince Sprocket. So that's cool. So at least they kept
That's
her in the
interesting.
mix while Rita was off the board. But in any event, I mean, this is a big development for Tommy. There was a brother he never knew about, and they are able to reunite, and they end on this note of, well, what do we do with this arrowhead? And then they have to pull it apart, so they each have their piece.
Right.
And this seems to now have quelled the inner turmoil within Tommy. He had, there was this restlessness within him, I suppose, and now he found this other part of himself, this long lost family member. I assumed this was the last we ever saw of David, but I was wrong. David comes back in one more episode, and I think he's just kind of there. I don't know that he has a huge role to play. I kind of was just kind of skimming through it quickly, but I think the purpose of that was, and we're going to get more into this, our next episode is all about the Gold Ranger. And I don't know how well you recall. Maybe you don't remember because if you kind of stopped at this point, but
No, I remember the Gold Ranger. And there was there were triplets that kind of were involved, and then Jason came back.
yes. Well, so
And
we'll get it.
yeah,
We'll get more into this next time. But so essentially, the Gold Ranger starts popping up and intervening in their battles, and it's a mystery to the characters and the audience who the Gold Ranger is. And yes, eventually we find out it's these triplets, Trey of Triforia. He can't maintain the power, and that's when Jason comes in. But there's this run of episodes where we and the Rangers don't know who the Gold Ranger is yet, and they were throwing a number of red herrings and different options at us. And my understanding is that's in large part why David came back in that episode when the Gold Ranger was running around. It was like, oh, maybe it's him.
okay,
They heavily hinted it was Billy. I mean, this is one of the memories I have from watching as a kid. I should save this for the next episode, but whatever, we're here. When there was one episode in particular where like everyone looked at Billy and he had like this kind of like sly look on his face, and that was the frame that they ended on. And I
yeah,
remember normally I watch by myself, but I remember my parents were watching with me for that particular one. And I remember turning to them like, Billy's the Gold Ranger. Like, I was so excited, and clearly that's not the direction that they went in. But
yeah,
but so I think that's why he came back, because it was kind of like, oh, maybe he's the Gold Ranger. So he did have at least one other appearance. So that's kind of cool that it wasn't just, the contained to it, because like this is a major life development.
yeah, yeah. No, that was yeah. I don't want to get ahead of you, but yeah, that was a cool character. I liked him because it was the Zeo equivalent of like the white and green ranger. So.
So, well, listen, I enjoy talking about these. I know they weren't your favorite episodes. I also know, again, to just kind of be dropped in to these episodes in particular, I can see how that might make it a little bit harder to get into them. I certainly, from my perspective, having rewatched a lot of these and, very recently, like it was just cool again to see this more personal approach. And they made a number of choices that I was actually impressed by, despite the various limitations and head scratching moments that we talked about. But I don't know, I had fun with my rewatch of these. I'll leave it at that.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I enjoy going back and rewatching this stuff because, again, like same as I said last time, I'm looking at these with like a different set of eyes. I am, as a kid, or I wasn't really a kid when these were out. I was a little bit older than probably I should have been watching them. I just watched to be entertained and didn't really think of it really beyond what I was looking at. Now I look at it and it's interesting because I'm like, wow, there was a noticeable difference in, the production value between, seasons prior and this and that, and, like different stuff here and there. So it was definitely a great watch.
Well, the last thing I'll say is I think another interesting aspect is that by the end of Mighty Morphin, they were shooting so much of their own footage. I mean, it's like other than the Zord stuff, essentially. I mean, when you look at all of the Ranger battles, because again, as we've said a million times, the White Ranger came from a different Super Sentai series than the rest of Mighty Morphin. So it's like any time you saw the entire team together, which was a lot.
Yeah.
It was American-made footage. So
yeah.
I think now what we're seeing in Zeo, and I guess we'll continue in the subsequent seasons, is more like what we got at the beginning of Mighty Morphin, where it's really primarily the them as civilians. That's the original footage, and then the rest is the Japanese footage. So I don't know, maybe there's a little bit of that kind of going around because we had gotten so used to a slightly different mode of production and storytelling, and now it's kind of like shifting back a little bit. But
one last thing that I've noticed, apparently the sun is never out in Japan. It's always overcast. Like it'll be sunny as hell in Angel Grove, but then as soon as they morph and it's not their footage, it is an overcast day. I know why they do that in terms of shooting, because you don't have to worry about lighting, but like in terms of continuity wise, like that always like drives me bananas.
Yes. No, I hear you. So the Dollar Bin Bandits podcast, you guys interview legendary and current comic book creators, the inside the actor studio of the comic book world, I believe.
Oh,
you guys bill yourselves. So, and I agree with that description. So, for people who want to find and follow the show, where would you like to direct them?
Dollar Bin Bandits on YouTube. If you go to Apple Podcasts, you can find us in Dollar Bin Bandits. Dollar Bin Bandits on Spotify. Dollar Bin Banter is our group on Facebook, our group page. So definitely check that out. People who like comics, who want to discuss any comics that they bought or, they found in their collection, definitely check that out. So we're out there in any form.
Awesome. Well, I hope everyone will check out your podcast and connect on social media. And I thank you very much for joining me for this. I enjoyed talking about it. And I'm glad that we got to have you back to actually talk about the show.
Thank you so much for having me back.
Audience, thank you as always for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you come back in 2 weeks for our next all-new episode. As teased, we will be concluding our look at the Zeo era, the Zeo season. And in particular, we'll be focusing on the Gold Ranger. Which I'm very excited. I haven't done my rewatch yet, but I'm very excited to get into those episodes and to talk about them. So make sure you come back. And of course, once a Ranger fan, always a Ranger fan. This show is part of the Flat Squirrel Podcast Network, home to Digging for Kryptonite, another exciting episode in the adventures of Superman, Summoning the Zords, and My Comic Shop History, available wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review today. Sign up at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato for additional content. Thank you all.